My name is Nick Ishimaru, and I am the artistic director here at Theater of Yugen. I'm also the director of our upcoming production of A Noh Christmas Carol, which runs December 1st through the 24th. The major themes that are influencing this particular production are the idea of community and society. At its heart, A Christmas Carol is really a story about a man who is being told that he has forgotten his connection to his community, to the people around him. Obviously, the Scrooge character, in our case Scrooge, he is a very wealthy landowning person who has lots of money that he doesn't ever use for any purpose. He just seems to hoard his wealth. He never spends it, even on himself. At least that would be some kind of display of his ostentatious earnings, but he never even wants to do that. And this play really challenges, why do we bother having wealth? What's the point of that if we don't use it to enrich the lives of other people? Even if we wanted to spend it on ourselves, it's not as fulfilling as being able to give back to the community that we belong to, that in many ways Scrooge has developed his wealth because of, that it's due to these people, and the spirits are here to jumpstart his memory and be like, hey, you have got to take this money and you've got to do something with your time here on earth, the time that you still have remaining to reconnect to the society around you. What we're seeing now, especially here in America, with our spiraling out of control wealth inequality, with our deep disconnect between communities who are in need and communities that have plenty, and trying to figure out how can we help overcome that kind of inequality? How can we help fight income inequality? One of the things that we have to remember is that charity and that giving back and being part of our society at large. Instead of thinking ourselves in terms of the haves and have-nots, we have to think of ourselves as one collective community, whether that's just here in the Mission District, whether that is in San Francisco, the state of California, America, or globally. It's critical that we remind ourselves of that. And I think at its core, that's what A Christmas Carol really does. This can be used in a Japanese context to answer those kinds of questions, because the time periods in which the Christmas Carol was written, the Victorian era in England, and the time period in which we have decided to set this production, Meiji era Japan, both in the late 1800s, were times of great wealth inequality, and times when there were great challenges to society about having to overcome certain parts of history and about having to face a very uncertain and dangerous future. In Victorian England, you had a period of peace and prosperity overseen by Queen Victoria that you hadn't seen for a very long time, and people were wanting very much to continue that peace and prosperity. There, at least from my American perspective, there's a great love of Queen Victoria. She's obviously a very celebrated monarch, had ruled for a very long time, and the idea of a purity or an innocence that still pervades our memories about that period was very critical. And on the other hand, in Japan, you have the Meiji era, where the idea of newness and freshness and of coming into a time of prosperity was the hope that people were aiming for. That kind of community is what the Japanese people needed at that time. The Meiji Restoration saw the return of the emperor to the head of political power in Japan. It was a time that followed great internalized strife as Japan was struggling with its own identity about how to adapt in a rapidly westernizing world as the colonial powers were threatening to tear it apart. And so deciding that it needed to move out of the past, sort of in parallel to the Christmas Carol, where Scrooge is, moving out of his past and moving into a future that is for the good of all people, for the good of society, and for keeping society and community together, to remembering that we are all together and part of society, was critical to the Meiji era in Japan. And I think that the historical distance that we get by taking a story from Victorian England, transposing it into historical Japan, and then performing it for a contemporary American audience helps us distance our own thought process about our immediate concerns and see them in a mirror that we can understand more effectively, in that sort of double-lensed way that reminds us that even though we are suffering from different kinds of insecurities and different kinds of challenges, that at the core, the need for community and the need for shared society is the same through all three.